about some of the practical applications of the knowledge we've done so far and dealing with our day-to-day interactions with the system. So we'll fire on. Okay, so I assure you this is pretty close to the last negative slide there is. But before we talk about how we deal with the system, I think it's absolutely critical that we have a reality check. And so the reality check is that we know that there's no rule of law since 1801. We know that there's no justice since the 1840s. We know that there's no proper accounting, as we showed, since the 1930s. There's no due process since the 1980s. And really we're dealing with complete incompetence since the 1990s. So it's not a good state of affairs, but that's a reality check. Okay. Here's another reality check, and it is, with all that in mind, what are the most powerful tools at your disposal in order to find some measure of result? The first point I want to say, and it's actually a spiritual point, but it's a really valid point. Whether you believe it or not, you are never tested for anything outside of your control. Now I know that may sound not right, but it's a point of reflection. But there are three things that are our tools where we can make a difference given all that chaos we saw. The first is knowledge. And the first knowledge to remember is that you are already in the office of man or the office of woman. You're already the highest person. You're already part of an unbreakable trust, whether the system wishes to recognise that or not. That's real, practical knowledge. We'll talk in the fourth session, again on this spiritual aspect of life as a dream, dream has rules, and the fact that your mind is immortal. We'll get to that. But one of the strongest controls the system has had to keep masses in line has been the fear of death. It is the greatest fear and therefore the greatest weapon the system has had. In truth, you have nothing to fear. And again, we'll reinforce that in the last session today, which is part of finding peace. Reading and learning the structure and history of the law. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to read, but it's empowering to know. It's empowering to know that the due processes of law have stayed largely the same for thousands of years. It should be empowering. It should be empowering to know that from the beginning of civilization to 1540, even though we can number 500,000 laws or so, that those laws, by and large, were the same laws over and over and over again. It's empowering to know that the same laws ruled. Rule of law was present. And that the rule of law and justice is always on the side of those that are righteous and honourable, even at the hands of pirates. No matter how hard it may seem, no matter how improbable that claim may appear. Character. Character absolutely is in our control. Wholly in our control. To be humble. To be honest. And never quick to prove how much you know. If there is a reason that people who should succeed in going to court don't succeed in going to court, and if we take Australia or America or Canada as an example, we hear of people who are well known, they go to court and they fail. Hubris. Hubris is probably the number one fault that undoes people more than anything else when they go to court. The fact that you know more than a judge, the fact that today I've shown you huge amounts of knowledge of the court, shouldn't then be a tool to go to court and say, I know there's no justice, I know there's no rule of law, and I know you're not a magistrate. That's not going to win any friends and influence people. So humility is a key part of character. Respect the institutions of law and officers. People find this frustrating, I find this frustrating. Why honour and respect something that shows so little respect for the rest of us? Why? Because they still symbolise the law for so many people. When you dishonour the office of Prime Minister, or if you're in America, the office of President, if you would dishonour the courts, you're actually dishonouring your community, the broader family, and ultimately yourself. And you're certainly dishonouring the law. You don't need to do that in order to prove. You do that by showing the character that you can demonstrate. And action. Let your actions speak for themselves. Let your words be your bond, and always seek to speak through questions. The Socratic method. The one who asks the question controls the court. The one who asks the question controls the argument. And forgive most of all those who transgress against you. Why? Because that is one way of expressing the golden rule. And last but not least, and I've emphasised this, there is no excuse not to be honourable and respectful to rule of law. And I say that keeping in mind how many horror stories that I am shown from people around the world and what they go through, and how much injustice and cruelty and torture and evil that people go through, that to say that seems almost absurd in the face of evil. But you cannot restore law with tyranny. You can't restore law and eliminate evil with evil.
But you can't deal with
And I know, it's a frustrating thing. It's a frustrating thing. So I ask you please just to keep that in mind, as difficult as it is. Restoring of law is to restore it through the demonstration of character, through action and through knowledge. So what's the purpose of official and agency business? Okay, so we're going to plan, we're going to prepare, we're going to try and prevent, and we're going to try and be prudent, which is smart. Plan, so we're going to plan by reclaiming our life, by allocating a set amount of time in our daily lives to get things done, and give yourself time to listen. So to commit. The fact that you're here today shows a commitment. The fact that people may listen to this audio and view these slides shows a commitment. But there needs to be commitment if one wishes to change, if one wishes to overcome. That's the first. The second is to prepare. We prepare by looking at our manor roll, looking at our documents, looking at our coats of arms and seals, our will and testament, charter of appointment, affidavit of appointment, and other documents that we've listed today, we've listed in previous audios, we'll list as part of today as well, and we will talk further in more detail. The preparation of going through these stages. Prevention. Prevention is trying to prevent undue harassment, attack, torture, but also respecting what community expects as standards. It's not condoning the system. It's not endorsing the system. It's not surrendering to the system. It's the fact that by acquiring the knowledge that you have here, by becoming the symbol of restoring the law you have here, to engage in matters that are ultimately of a minor nature that can be avoided, is to allow your energy to be wasted. Allow your abilities to be wasted. Now I know the counter-argument is to say, well, where do you draw the line? Why not draw the line on a parking fine? Sure, some people have. Why not draw it on unfair traffic stop? Why not draw the line on taxes? Why not draw the line on family law court. There are lines to be drawn, and people have drawn those lines. But as a general sense, I say to people, because if there is a way that the system is responding to people waking up, it's to use people who draw a line on what would be considered relatively minor. I would consider a slave bond and annuity to be a major thing. That's what I consider to be. And a parking fine, relatively speaking, to be less major. But they're using people's reaction to those kinds of things to create a community expectation that these people are anti-government, anti-social, terrorists, and so forth. So you don't live in a vacuum, and these lessons don't live in a vacuum either. And one way to demonstrate the lie of those claims is, where you can, to minimise harassment. Not by agreeing and participating, but if you can, minimise harassment. And ultimately, prudence. Choose when and how and the timing of how you move forward. Remember, this system is broken, and the reality check that we've done, and we've said now several times today, is to recognise there is no rule of law, there is no justice, there is no accountability, there is no due process. There is only the appearance of due process, only the appearance of justice. And the people that maintain that appearance will be the judge or the magistrate that you stand before in that court. So be prudent in your action. Be careful in your action. Okay, thank you. So, know that you are all these things. Know that you are all these different persons, and that you are not a thing. Know that you are the trustee of your own true trust as the office of man and woman, the highest form of trust, and no one can break that trust. No one can break that trust. Know, as a second person, when you fulfil your will and testament, that you are sovereign of your own estate. I tell you an example of how broken and silly the system is. The American Constitution states in its first section, under Section 9, that citizens, that there is no nobility in America. You've probably heard this. There is no nobility in America. And the reason is, under Article 1, Section 9, it says there is no title. And what the Founding Fathers meant by that is that everyone is sovereign. So if you're an American citizen, you are technically, even though it's an oxymoron of a title, you are a sovereign citizen. Well, guess what? One of the things that the counter-intelligence community are using now is they're claiming that sovereign citizens are terrorists, when the Constitution says that every American, by definition, is a sovereign citizen. That's how stupid they are. Not the people, but the system. You are sovereign of your estate in name and the general executor and guardian when you perfect that. And the argument when someone says that you can't be sovereign is to say that the Queen is sovereign of an estate, and she's sovereign because she took an oath to the estate. And the estate that we are sovereign, which we define, incorporates not only the testamentary estate after we die, but that Sesta KV trust and temporary estate, temporary living estate that they created. The fact that they've created an estate in our name now means that there is an estate for which we have the right to claim, regardless of what happens when we physically die. So any argument that you cannot be the general executor and guardian of your own estate is an absolute bald-faced lie. And finally, you are the mendicant minister, plenipotentiary, of a charitable corporation sole of the estate as the agent, and the minister plenipotentiary. So when one sets up a corporation sole as a derivative of your will and testament, whether you run that as a charitable trust, this is something that you'll hear me talk about more and more as integrating and interfacing with the system, and how one can move through this effectively. Okay. So the current world deals with commerce. And one of the problems that we've had in the past is people say, well, I'm the office of man. I go into court and say, I'm the office of man. The court says, well, we deal with agents. We deal with things. We can't deal with you. Or someone goes to court and says, I'm the general executor. And the court says, well, if you say another word, I'll have you in contempt. The legal system, the commercial system, deals with agents and things down this level here. So our level here as an office of man, our level here as a general executor is outside of the scope of engaging with the system. So why do we do it? It's the iceberg effect. When we engage here, all of this backs it up. All of this is behind the scenes. All this knowledge is perfected behind the scenes. We don't just pluck this out. This is the reinforcement that if they try and engage beyond that, all this is supporting it.
So do you just have to refuse to go down to that level?
You need to have done all this down to here if you want to be in a position of strength. Now, some people can engage at that. There's the role of the Mackenzie friend as an example in court, where people can come or get someone as an agent. But the system increasingly is using its own rules to restrict, confine, and let's face it, we've got 100 million laws out there, of which 90% of them aren't laws at all. So relying on them doing the right thing is, I think, overly optimistic. We need to rely on ourselves to be able to engage with them here with all of that in place, ideally. Okay, why mendicant minister? We were asked that earlier. Why the mendicant? And here it is. The doctrines of justice, clean hands, good faith, no prejudice. So a mendicant is one, clean hands, means no claim tied to wealth, especially as a vow of poverty. It doesn't mean living on the street. It means you're custodian and using property with respect, but you don't claim things to yourself. They're in your trust, they're in your corporation soul. See, the system tricks us in saying that you only have two choices. You either claim ownership or you have nothing. So the third choice, that you are the custodian of property and that you claim nothing. That's the third choice that they give to themselves but deny to us. Good faith, as a minister, means that you have the authority to deal with property, convey property and function. Now, it doesn't mean that you become a Christian minister or any religious minister. It means that you recognise a deeper spiritual connection, that we physically own nothing, that we are here as tenants, that our bodies will dissolve and die, but our minds live beyond this life. And as we are custodians, as we are temporary tenants on this planet, we respect everything around us. And we have a vow to do no harm. We have a vow that we seek to be honourable in what we do. That's all we mean by good faith. That's all we mean. And humility. Again, this word of humility. To respect the law and not to seek to impose our knowledge on people. To say, look how much I know, Your Honour. Look how much I know, judge or lawyer or police officer. Or don't you know what the law means? Apart from the fact of being confrontational, it is hubris. And as time keeps showing us, hubris is reacted by the system as a means of taking people down a peg. And it happens all the time. All the time. And there's a bottom line point there that says, these qualities in an agent makes them the judge. If you come to court with those qualities, and you are that, and you are the judge, and they know you're the judge, and you know you're the judge. Okay, we spoke about the law's broken. How do they get away with the fraud? Because it is a fraud. How do they get away with it? So, in English law, we should go, affidavit, complaint and bill, right? We saw that earlier? Yeah? Well, if you're going to court and you're being charged, anyone being charged, we don't have to put your hand up, we're not going to be filmed, but yeah, okay, right. Did you ever get an affidavit? No, you didn't. Did you get an affidavit? An affidavit of complaint? Okay, all right. Depends on the nature of the charges. Did you ever see an original bill? Okay, all right. So you might have seen 1X, you might have seen 2Xs. But 1X in a fundamental process is pretty bad, isn't it? Yeah? So this is what they do. They make they don't give you a bill, they make the charge the actus reus of the guilty act. So the fact that they charge you means the charge is proof that you're guilty in act. Yeah? And then they make the complaint the mens rea, rather than the affidavit, of guilty mind. The fact that there is a complaint behind the charge is actus reus in guilty mind. You see, that's how you're guilty before being proven innocent. That's how magistrates' court, their system works. You see all that? And modern fast justice means no affidavit, no original bill, an assumption by complaint, as we said, you are automatically guilty. Now, do we have an answer? We do. I'm just going to have a quick sip. Okay. How do we challenge the broken law? Do you see something we can bring in that they knock off, that we can bring in? The affidavit. How powerful is the original true cause to a case? Powerful? Yeah? The only way to defeat the false presumption of guilt is to complete a proffered affidavit and motion for dismissal. Yeah? Okay. Why, this would be the question I would have, why does a corporate system not produce an affidavit if it's so fundamental? Most cases it can't. It can't. Right. And we'll go through why it can't. The original affidavit supporting a complaint must be about first-hand facts and knowledge, not hearsay. First-hand facts.
So that's just like evidence that they
No, hear what I say. I say first-hand facts and what I see. I saw it, I know it. Yeah? First-hand, not someone told me or I found it on Wikipedia. Yeah? It's absolutely first-hand. To claim something broke the law, something, there you go, Freudian slip. To claim someone broke the law without actually seeing them break the law is a false testimony. Doesn't stack up. The one doing an affidavit must be from the perspective of propria persona or sui juris, a man or a woman, not a government agent. Means nothing. Means absolutely nothing in an affidavit, as the original affidavit must demonstrate clean hands without prejudice, or else it is a biased and unacceptable testimony. Yeah? That's why they can't do it. Why does the corporate system not produce a bill? We said those are two X's it doesn't do, an affidavit and a bill. Bills are formal declarations, complaints or statements issued by a chancery of an estate. Remember we spoke about you getting your house in order and building a chancery, an original concept, yeah? Regarding prescriptive rights, which means a sovereign right, or right defined by statute. They are in effect private indulgences issued by an estate and sometimes permitted to be issued by members of the estate. So a statute might allow you to produce a bill of sale, or those have all been wound back, or other types of bills. Bills of exchange used to be in the public. They're being wound back as well. Corporations cannot claim prescriptive rights as they are subsidiary franchises of the estate. They're not estates, they're corporations, they're subsidiaries, and cannot possess chanceries. Instead, corporations can only issue claims. A charge is just a claim. That's all it is. Claim against the higher estate, hence charges. So now do we know why they can't issue a bill? So they can't issue a bill and they can't issue normally a proper affidavit. So how does the system actually do it? How does the system again wheel itself around? Through mistakes, frauds, threats, and following truth disinfo agents, most people end up convicted. Not the original offence, all the stuff-ups they do after. Right? How do they do it? What are the three biggies that they get people, trick people into doing? More than 70% of people known as sovereign citizens found guilty of white-collar crimes go to prison not because of the originating charge, but the subsequent, I'm sorry about the language, but I'm here, idiotic, stupid and deliberately false actions they used from promotions to disinfo agents in the truth movement. And what are the three biggies? Mail fraud, false recording of liens, and false UCC filings. Now why are these the low-hanging fruit for the existing system, if you think about what we said about affidavits? What do you have to have for an affidavit? Well, the two things you need to know. First hand, you saw it, and knowledge, yeah? So what's the beauty of any of those for them about doing an affidavit? What can you do if they happen? Can the system run an affidavit if you do one of those? It can, can't it? It can't do it on the original one, but it can certainly do it on this one. You see now why they trick people? Can you write an affidavit if you are accused of one of those in the system? How do you prove mail fraud?
Because it could have been someone else that had done it? Or?
Well, no. If you've got a document sent by mail with your own handwriting and you can bring that forward, could you write an affidavit that you can swear that mail fraud took place as the originating affidavit? Of course you can. You got the evidence. But if you weren't present,
Just because they've made a mistake on
right. But if the original charge was that you hit someone and they weren't present, could they write an affidavit on that? They couldn't, could they? So they're better to get you on the mail fraud than the originating because they can't swear they weren't there. An affidavit can only be sworn on first-hand facts. I know, I saw. So if you do something on paper, if you do a paper-based crime, then of course the system can nail people. But if the original crime was something that they can't swear to, a victimless crime, for example, then they're going to have trouble, aren't they, if you're standing up for your rights? So they loop people in and they send people out and they send them down rabbit holes and they fill their head full of rubbish and they end up getting nailed for mail fraud, false recordings of liens or false UCC filings, or sometimes all three. Okay? Once no originating affidavit is exposed, the system needs disinfo agents to trick people into creating errors of action, which the system can easily create affidavits as a first-hand witness. So are we clear on that? Yeah? Okay. Public forms and private forms. So here's another trick. Statutes create forms. Public statutes create different types of forms, either explicitly as a schedule or implicitly by the information defined in the statute. If we take an oath, for example, there is in New South Wales the Oaths Act of 1900, which has been amended several times. There are Oaths Act in the UK, there are Oaths Acts in the United States of America and elsewhere in the world. But what does the system trick us into doing when we put information into the courts? What's the first words that the court wants us to do on any form? Anyone?
Give their name.
Give their name. Yeah. They want you to put their name. Now, is the Supreme Court of New South Wales currently a private for-profit corporation or the original estate court? Is it a corporation? It's a corporation, that's right. So once you put their name on the top of the form, what can they then do? What have you just given them? A private form. And what can they do? What rules do they give themselves about private forms? What can they do? Anything. I'm not going to accept your affidavit. You saw how powerful an affidavit was, yeah? So how do they trick people into not accepting affidavits? We won't accept it. Why? We just won't. Oh, well, I did everything correctly. Yeah, we just don't accept it. Have you heard of people having paperwork refused by a court? Now, remembering that there is no rule of law, there is no justice, there's a fine line here, but it's not about manning the barricades. If a public statute, which they still claim to be a public court, does the New South Wales Supreme Court, for example, still claim to be a public court?
Yeah.
Okay. So why should we argue against that? Because it makes people look like lunatics, doesn't it? If it's a public court, does that mean that it recognises it is under the jurisdiction of public statute? Beautiful. Excellent. That's all that's needed. Here's a public form. If a public form is submitted to a public court and the public statute is perfected, are they going to have a hard time knocking that off? Okay. Now, we're not saying to people to do the wrong thing. We're saying you have public statutes that you claim are on the books. You claim to be a public court. Fair enough. If you're not, tell us. If you're a corporation and you're running money and you're selling money and you're organised crime, then put that on the table so everyone can know it. If you're going to hide behind nefarious and claim us to be conspiracy, fine. We'll just use a public form. You see how easy it is to be tricked and how you can overcome that. Okay, we'll move on. So I guess we want to talk about affidavits, and we're going to go through questions in a second, yeah? So we want to go through how proper affidavits are formed, given they're pretty important? Yeah? Okay. Public statute at the top. Would you ever put the name of a private commercial business ever again on the top of one of their forms? Right, okay. Deponent is the one making the affidavit. Respondent is the one that's responding to. Date, reference number, affidavit. Now, I will get examples up there. I haven't got an example up there now, but I will. Sorry.
So this is if you're writing an affidavit to the court to dispute something or...
In law, every action requires a cause and a form. So a motion to dismiss, a claim of right, a statement of claim for payments being made, a response to a charge. The affidavit is the cause. It's the mind of the person, and then the form is the motion that goes with it. So there is 1,000 different reasons to do an affidavit. It depends on the circumstance. How you complete it and why is what we're doing. The context of what we went through. Did you see those slides we went through and we showed what the standard actions of law is? That it begins with an affidavit and follows through. Well, that's what we're dealing with at the moment. Okay. We'll go through these sections. We have the opening declaration, then the list of facts numbered, the closing declaration, signatures, certificate of witness, and certificate of annexures. This is pretty much standard across Australia, United States of America, Canada, United Kingdom, bless you, New Zealand, right across the board, okay? And every page, every annexure must be signed and witnessed. Must be signed and witnessed, okay? So we're going to go through those sections. Oh, by the way, don't get creative on affidavits. They have to be clear form and function. You saw, you know, okay? Inclusion of hearsay, subjective, non-factual wording, plus the use of Jabberwocky phrases from remedy gurus will render your affidavit null, even if it's on a public form. Okay? All right. What's the opening and closing declaration? So you replace the bracketed text. So I, such and such, currently domiciled near, address location, currently do solemnly and sincerely swear or affirm and declare with good faith and without prejudice. That's the opening. And then number one, I was born on the and am years of age I'm sound mind and reason, do sincerely and honestly affirm the present instrument to my own words, written by me, given freely and without duress, and expressing accurately to the best of my ability the facts herein of which I have witnessed first hand and have expert knowledge. Now, blah, blah, blah. That sounds, if you've read the Will and Testament, very much like the opening of a Will and Testament. Testament's a testimony. Affidavit's a written testimony. Similar form. Similar form. Okay? But don't get creative on the words. Don't think that by adding more words, it gets stronger. Yeah? Every word has a meaning in their legal structure, history structure, requirements. You can't write an affidavit if you're not of sound mind. You can't write an affidavit if someone's got a gun pointing to your head. Yeah? You can't write an affidavit on things you don't know. So those words are very specifically presented there as the, if you like, best example of an opening declaration for an affidavit. So everyone got that bit first? Is that clear?
Yeah.
I don't see how you can be a witness to your date of birth.
No, it doesn't say that. It says I was born on the, and then the age of, full stop.
But that's hearsay, is it not? Like from
No, it's a fact. It's a fact.
Yep.
It's seen as a fact. Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
Even though you don't know, not aware exactly when you were born, you've got to rely on other people's testimony.
This is where you've got to get careful on it. Is the fact that you were born on a date and age something disputed by them? No. Okay. It's just establishing that you exist. It's merely a tradition of the fact that an affidavit... Now, is an affidavit written by a person or a man? I've already answered that. Is it a man or a person or what? A man. Right. So a man needs to be born. A man needs to have an age. You have to be over the age of being a minor to do an affidavit. That's why that's there. Remember I said to you, every word, every phrase is a legal history. Now you know why. Affidavits from man or woman. That phrase says you're alive, you're living, here you are, and you're over the age. Yeah? Good question though. So closing declaration. All the facts and circumstances deposed herein are within my knowledge and expertise, except such as deposed herein from information only in accord with my reasonable knowledge and sources of information as appear within the present affidavit. Well, that's classic legalese, but it's saying everything. It's basically affirming what was written here. It's saying, I said I'd do it, and I've done it. Yeah? It's the opening and the closing. All right? And what goes in there is then fact 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Okay. When you are writing your facts, you will possibly be referring to annexures. Annexures are documents to which you refer, for which you either have first-hand experience of citing or knowledge. Yeah? So when you mention them in the context of your affidavit, you will number them. You'll say annexure 1, annexure 2, so forth. Or they can be A, B, C. It can be alpha or numeric, not a mix of both. Yeah? Once you finish those, then at the end, we said there's a certificate of witness, which is now part of the Oaths Act in Australia. It's been a standard feature called the Certificate of Acknowledgement in the United States, which is usually done by a notary. So here we have the same standard now. But then after that, you have the Certificate of Annexures. Now, the Certificate of Annexures is to prove that at the time that the witness, being in Australia the Justice of the Peace, the United Kingdom Justice of the Peace, or Canada or New Zealand the Justice of the Peace, in America it would be a notary, usually, actually read your affidavit, signed each page as a witness along with our signature, signed it at the end, then saw the complete set of annexures, signs each page of the annexure, then at the end of it does this to say I actually saw them. Now if you think about it, it's all got to be part of the same. But again, I raise this because this is an area of deficiency. People don't take care with their affidavits. They just slap them up. I've seen people post affidavits from all over Australia saying, I sent an affidavit on this election, or I did an affidavit on this. It's not an affidavit. It's not an affidavit. It's not a proper affidavit. There's a form. So it's just saying, you know, I such and such certify the following annexures 1 to whatever, referred to in affidavit, whatever, then 1 being a true copy of, 2 being, and then affirmed at the end. Okay?
We can put off date on that as well.
If you can put information on the description of the annexure.
Last name on.
Yeah, on date, yeah. And I'll have examples up there, but I only put that up on the certificate of annexures because it's the most common defect of people doing affidavits, not to have the certificate of annexures. Okay?
So Frank, when we draft that, do we put a copy extract on it as well when we send it?
On the affidavit? No, your affidavit should be originals when you do it. You can send a copy to people. Let's say you are contemplating a legal action. You could send a copy of an affidavit to a party and hold the original in case you move forward to court. Yeah? Sometimes that will occur, but courts normally will never accept an affidavit without the original. Yeah? Which is fine, but you know why they don't accept the original affidavit? Well, because it's the original cause, isn't it? That's why they usually only accept an original. Yeah?
You can make a number of originals, don't you? The same thing.
Of course you can. Of course you can. But the one that gets witnessed by the usually a justice of the peace in Australia or a notary in America will only witness and sign 1 copy. Yeah? 1 copy, 1 original. 1 original. Yeah. Yeah.
You can make 5.
Oh, of course, but usually they'll only do 1. Yeah? Usually only do 1. So, yeah.
So would it be like white paper with blue text or black?
Well, if it's an original, what colour would it be? It'd be white paper, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Here's another area that I want to cover, which is people being faced with demand for payment. Have anyone here got nasty letters from people from a machine saying, "Pay me now"? Yeah? Okay, right. All right. So, let the actions and intentions of the people speak for themselves. Never surrender your honour when faced with a demand for payment. I mean, it's easy to say that, but you'll see why in a second. If you agree to pay something, then you are in fact honour bound to pay it. I don't have time to talk about foreclosures today, but there are ways to extract yourself from an agreement where you were bound to honour that agreement. Yeah? But your reaction to a demand in the context of an agreement cannot be, "I'm not going to pay." That's dishonourable. So, we're not talking about that. We're talking about when someone comes in and says, pay me up, pay me money, and you've never heard that amount, the amount's just suddenly appeared, they want you to pay a penalty. Yeah? If you didn't agree to the penalties or some other claim in the past, you have the right to ask for more information first. And this is some thoughts to keep in mind. Let them know you seek to resolve the matter, but genuinely need more information. It's in your right. Yeah? Thank you for your demand for a pound of flesh. If you can please provide this information, I'm authorised to settle and close the matter. Yeah? That's perfectly reasonable. It's not a fraud, it's not a lie, it's absolutely how to handle it. Request all contracts in writing. Apologise, a typo. And any phone calls, request or contact in writing. Yeah, so I'm actually correct, it wasn't a typo. Or contact in writing, and any phone call ceases harassment. So immediately say, if it's a debt collection agency, thank you, but from here on in, I formally request that all contact be in writing. Okay? Stop it. And any further contact by phone would be construed as harassment, to be followed up by the Ombudsman and other sections that give you that ability to stop harassment. If it's a claim of debt, then please provide copies of its details, how it was sold and incurred. If it's a debt agency, please provide me a copy of the paperwork which is surrounding that debt. How it was purchased, why you purchased it, and what claim is used for you to pursue it. They're demanding money, you need to be given the paperwork. The same as going to court. You get charged, how do you plead? Do you understand the charges? Well, I haven't even read the paperwork. How can I agree to something I haven't seen? It's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable. If it includes a penalty, then provide copies and terms of the contract in which you agreed. Bottom line with penalties, they can't issue a penalty unless 1, you agreed by contract, 2, they're a church, 3, they're a court. And church, I mean they're the Church of England or the Catholic Church, or they are a court. Because a penalty is a penance, and a penance is an ecclesiastical issue. Okay? So either show me the contract, well, you don't have to tell them, you don't have to threaten, just say, show me the contract where I agree. If you agree to a penalty, then that's, that's why there are penalty rates in agreements. Yeah? Set deadline. Please don't miss this one. Please don't meet this one. Don't leave it open-ended. Set a deadline for when the information is needed in writing. You need this information. You've written to me as a matter of urgency, I want to settle the matter. I urgently want to pay you. Urgently. When the information is needed in writing, and if not sent, that non-response constitute agreement to a false claim. Yeah? And if date comes, material does not come, write back a default, which includes the properly completed, and you can do this. You can write back and say that you failed, and if failure for you to respond with any reason for failure, that you are now delinquent in your claim. Yeah? And if you want to get real fancy on that after that, then you take all of that on a debt collection agency, and guess what you'd added in as facts? What would those facts be good for? Starts with A, ends with T. We've just been talking about it. An affidavit. An affidavit. Checkmate. Now look, if you owe money, you are obligated. Your word is your bond. Your word is your bond. And everyone needs to contribute. But no one anywhere on this planet has the right to shake you down for something without due course, without fair reason. No one has the right. No one has the right to use the law as a weapon to do that. The system knows that, they know that, and you know now, clearly know that. Okay. I feel like a politician today. So I'm talking. All right. Voluntary appearance to court. So if you enter a court of your own volition, always assumes you are prepared, you position clearly and properly, especially giving notice of status of appearance. What do we say at the very beginning if you go to court on a summons? What do they assume you are? Starts with T, ends with J. A thing. Yeah. You don't want to be a thing. That gives them jus in rem, complete control over you. You don't want that, do you? Yeah? So...
You're not allowed to ask questions.
Okay. If you're a thing, you're sitting on a thing and there's a thing in front of you. Yeah? Complete and total control. Yeah? You don't want to be under complete and total control, do you? Right. That's why you don't want to be a thing. Yeah? So the way you do that is to respond. Thank you for your invitation, because the summons is an invitation. I'm authorised to set and close this matter, so I will be attending by special appearance sui juris. Yeah? Please provide me the following information so we can settle the matter. If this is the information I require, okay, I need a copy of the original complaint, affidavit. I need the complaint notice, yeah? I need the charges, yeah? I need any other witness statements, please. And if it doesn't come by, if they've given you 28 days, I need it in 7 days in writing. 14 days in writing. If it doesn't come in 14 days, then you're enacting bad faith and unclean hands.
Is there a minimum time limit you have to give them? Is that the 7 to 14?
Well,
Or it has to be reasonable?
they give us unreasonable time limits all the time. Why should you... Look, can a system produce... If they have it, can a system send you mail in 7 days? They can hand deliver it if they want to, and they do, right? So is there anything hard if for 28 days before you go to court, giving them 14 days, consecutive days, to respond to you, yeah? Or even 10 days, yeah? to respond to you in good faith. They've summoned you to court on a serious matter, right? It's serious. So given it's serious, they surely must have the information there, and you have absolutely the right to have it in your hands before the date because you want to know where you stand. Is this a shakedown? Yeah? Now, guess what? If they don't come back in time and they default, you write back to them. Thank you, I'm still attending in good faith by special appearance, but I'm now writing to say that you're in default. You're delinquent, in bad faith. And guess what? When you arrive on the day, you're going to have an affidavit that the court is in delinquency and failed to produce all this evidence in your affidavit.
In the context of costs, would it be fair and reasonable for you to put that affidavit a schedule of fees?
I would be careful with that, and I'll tell you why I'd be careful with the schedule of fees. Yes, it would be for someone that has demonstrated all the other things we've done. Why I would be careful of that is that this is a private court, a private business masquerading as a public court, and they will use anything to put a spin on it. People have taken the intention of schedule of fees and abused it. And unfortunately what happens with information sometimes, the abuse renders the instrument defective. And in the case of schedule of fees, there is now the general assumption, because it has been abused, that if one includes that, it's an act of bad faith, not good faith. So for the sake, put it this way, for the sake of having the matter resolved in your favour, even though there is a genuine cost in time and pain and all those things, I would not include schedule of fees merely to eliminate the possibility of that being used as an act of bad faith. Okay? And the fact that they view the world through their own rules and saying we don't recognise your ability to issue schedule of fees, and then defeat your claim purely on that technicality.
Is there any way then to remedy the exercise of your time?
They don't regard that you have any right on that. So I think
the
that...
implication is then you're a slave.
Right. So you're remember I said to you, based that there's chaos behind the scenes. There's this very thin plasterboard, and that plasterboard represents a few court officers that may actually care about the law or may not care about the law. You're trying to minimise, you're trying to basically get a camel through the eye of a needle, yeah? So try and minimise the baggage on the camel, yeah? And it might get through. That's all, I think that's, and I hear what you're saying. Unfortunately, schedule of fees is seen like, you know, a couple of big saddlebags, right? That's all it is. I don't disagree with you, and I think your time is as precious as the judge. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. But we're dealing with a system so broken and so corrupt in many ways that it will use any single argument to render it null and void. Like mentioning the court's name to call it a private affidavit, right? They're using everything to knock it on the head. Voluntary appearance in court. So we've made these points, but we walk into court. You've probably heard this, me say this. You walk into court and you ask, will you be hearing the matter today in good faith and without prejudice, Your Honour? Then we can role play. You can have a belligerent judge and says, no, yes, why? We won't do the role play. We're just trying to get the questions out. Second question, do I have your oath on that, Your Honour, to establish that he's a true judge or she's a true judge? And then the third, really, the only third question to ask is my affidavit part of the official record of proceedings here today, Your Honour? And then shut up. Because another way that they get to knock people on the head with an affidavit is argue with you. It's all in the affidavit, Your Honour. It's in the affidavit, Your Honour. You have my affidavit, Your Honour. It's in the affidavit. Oh, well, I'm not sure about this affidavit. Well, please, you know, it's there. Right? It's perfected. So that's the thing. Because if you start arguing the affidavit, you render your own affidavit null. You see? Another trick. It's all tricks. Trick, trick, trick.
So is that you just be quiet in the court in the way of saying what you've already said in writing?
The affidavit speaks for itself. Exactly.
Could you offer to read the affidavit?
Sorry?
Could you offer to read the affidavit in court?
Absolutely. Every jurisdiction has key laws, procedures in your favour against judges making false oaths, obstruction of justice, bias, abuse of process. Learn and know and be prepared to quote exactly these codes. So you're not naked to this. Okay. Right. If judge shows bias, Your Honour, a fair-minded lay observer might reasonably apprehend that your actions are not impartial and that your conduct is an abusive process. I therefore ask how you wish me to proceed with an application for disqualification. I know it's a lot of words and you can read off a script, okay, so don't worry about that. And if he says, well, I'm not going to hear that, very well, then I seek the grant of leave to appeal for an immediate ruling. He can't simply knock it on the head on that statement. That statement says, because I've taken from their definition, a definition of apprehended bias is that a fair-minded lay observer might reasonably apprehend that actions are not impartial. I've already said that. So it is impossible for a judge to deny an apprehended bias application on the basis of that question. But they will. They will. So you move to a grant of leave to appeal for immediate ruling. I can't get into the detail of how you handle yourself in each jurisdiction because it's different in New South Wales, it's different in Queensland, it's different in California, Montana, Edmonton. You know, that's what they do. They change these things in each jurisdiction. But every jurisdiction has key laws, procedures in your favour.
Where do we find this kind of information then?
You've got to go online, you've got to look, and same in New South Wales. What's the procedures for New South Wales? Okay.
Point of appeal as opposed to review.
It's appeal. Appeal for a review, an immediate ruling. A leave to appeal is what one technically has to say if a application for disqualification is immediate, because the application for disqualification by their rules is heard by the judge who you're saying is biased. I know that sounds corrupt, but that's actually how it works. If that's knocked off, if they say no, I'm not going to disqualify myself, then you appeal to the immediate ruling is to the higher. You either go through the clerk or usually the head judge of that particular court of jurisdiction. And an immediate appeal means it's called in. It is a priority because they're worried about that. This is increasing. Judges increasingly are stepping over the mark. So they will treat it very seriously, and one shouldn't do this or even consider this if a judge is showing, you know, good faith and no prejudice. Yeah.
Do you consider asking them to recuse themselves before going to the grant of leave to appeal?
Well, you've pretty much, you can't, and this has been an error in the past, if you directly demand a judge to recuse themselves without the hearing, you've basically circumvented the procedure. And so a judge automatically, you basically give a judge a free pass. I'll give you an example. In the United States, the rules for judges being disqualified for bias is far more explicit than it is in Commonwealth jurisdiction like Australia. Funny about that. But over there, what people have done is they've bypassed the fact that it still needs to be heard. There still has to be a motion to recuse in America. Here, there has to be a proper application, that application being heard. Yeah?
By another judge?
No, an application for disqualification is by the judge or the magistrate to whom you are addressing. Yeah? It's giving them the right to... the reason the system argues is it gives them the right to correct themselves. Yeah? That's why they do it. And it's only when a judge denies it and you move to an appeal does it go outside of the court that you're currently in. You follow? But to bypass that procedure, remember, we're saying here due process is the last line of defence in a broken system. Yeah? You can't bypass the procedure yourself and say, I ask you to recuse yourself, which is presumption of guilt before innocence, isn't it? Until the process goes through. So that's the fine point. And a lot of people have made that mistake and said, those few questions, well, Your Honour, I ask you recuse yourself. He'll say or she'll say no. You've just defeated yourself, you just own gold yourself. Yeah? Because the process is this. A fair-minded lay observer might reasonably apprehend that your actions are not impartial and that your conduct is an abusive process. Then you ask, how will I proceed with an application of disqualification?
Which is the same as asking to recuse yourself.
Which is,
without saying-
yeah, which is we've got to start this process now of getting you recused. Yeah? I know it's